Hey everyone, before we get started, we just wanted to mention that we were invited to be part of a really cool video interview with Ken over at Sledgehammer Horror for his My First Horror Movie series. And if you are interested in learning more about the first experiences Joseph and I both had as children with horror films, please check it out. The link is posted below. Thanks.
That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The New York Ripper, Lucio Fulci's infamous 1982 film, which is being released on 4K, Ultra Digital HD.
All the things.
On August 25th, 2020, in conjunction with the label is also releasing The House by the Cemetery.
So this is, you said the trilogy of what?
No, this film is not part of that trilogy.
Oh, it's not?
No, the Gates of Hell trilogy, that's House by the Cemetery,
which I watched,
The Beyond, and City of the Living Dead.
Oh, okay.
But this is a standalone. This, of course, was Fulci's, I guess, homage to Hitchcock, and was banned in Britain up until 2002.
So the New York Ripper reminded me of like a mix of Maniac with Dress to Kill. So
and also Abel Ferrara's Driller Killer in there. These films, it arrived the year after Maniac.
The quality of the film is decent, and I think the acting's decent. Obviously, the dubbing is a little off. Not as bad as like The House by the Cemetery, but what really sets this film apart is the killer speaks in like a Donald Duck voice.
Yeah.
And it's not subtle.
No.
It's like full on. So when we were deciding which of these Fulci films we should watch, because we received all of them, we watched several trailers, and of course I had to add this one because like someone is speaking like Donald Duck.
Yeah.
It's definitely a gimmick.
I mean, I saw this when I was an undergrad and remember hating it, but also saw not a very good print of it.
So the basic story is there's a serial killer out here killing females who are associated with like sex work.
Promiscuous women. Or
how we ultimately find out he deems as promiscuous.
Which Jack the Ripper, of course, killed prostitutes, so.
And this killer is taunting the police, calling them with this Donald Duck voice. So there are several players. There is the lieutenant,
played by Jack Hedley,
who I know from The Anniversary.
He was one of Betty Davis's sons in The Anniversary,
which is a fun movie.
But his bigger film credit, he was in the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only.
There is a sort of swarthy Greek man who's missing two fingers. He's kind of a red herring because we see him interacting with women.
Well, a couple of the victims.
And a couple of the victims, but it's so obvious that like, I mean, we would think he's the killer, so he's probably not. There is a woman who's married to a rich man. So she's a rich man's wife, an older lady played by
Alexandra Delli, who was married to the famous cinematographer Tonino Delli, who shot one of my favorite films ever made, Death and the Maiden.
She's has a really interesting presence on screen. And her character is basically out in these streets. She likes to, like, these dangerous sexual liaisons. Like, she visits, like, adult movie theaters and, like, masturbates in the theater while she records the audio to give to her husband.
She's very much the Angie Dickinson character of Dress to Kill. That mechanism.
So we have her. We have one of the victims of the serial killer who got away. The Reese Witherspoon looking lady.
Oh yeah, Kay Majors, played by Almanta Keller.
She's important because she has a disorder where she like...
Under certain circumstances she'll hallucinate.
So when she's assaulted, when the lieutenant asks her like, oh, was it this like Greek man that who he already suspects is the killer, she says yes. But she's not a reliable source of information. Of note, her man is Peter's this handsome young man.
A physicist.
She tells him like, I had a dream that you assaulted me. And then he's like, ha ha, funny. Then we have the man who played Norman in House by the Cemetery.
Paolo Malco.
Who I do like. He plays like a
He's
a profiler.
a psychology professor at Columbia University.
But the police department hires him to kind of profile who he might think the killer is.
And then it's also made clear to us that he's gay.
For some reason.
I think that's maybe to think... I feel like that's these filmmakers saying that he's a sexual deviant, and maybe it's a way to...
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Suspect him, because he's shown buying gay porn.
That's right.
Secretly, but...
So, so it's the lieutenant trying to figure out who the killer is, and the gag is it's Peter, the husband of the Reese Witherspoon looking lady. Mm-hmm. But what's even more ridiculous than the Donald Duck sounds is his motive for killing.
Because Peter has a daughter that has a rare bone disorder that has made her sterile, and she's just basically lying in a hospital.
This old fragile girl is lying in a hospital bed. She's unable to ever have children. So Peter resents promiscuous women who he thinks are like not like honoring their bodies by having babies or something. So stupid.
It's like, like most pro-lifers.
But the film ends with the Reese Witherspoon looking lady. Like, she comes home and then realizes that she comes to the realization that it was Peter who assaulted her, and he is the serial killer, so she kills him.
There are a few weird things that are confounding as well, because the Greek man breaks into her apartment and then escapes and then kills himself. That's a thing. And then his body is discovered 8 days later, rotting. In that time frame,
someone else was killed.
Kitty, who is the prostitute girlfriend of the lieutenant, is also cut up.
So obviously the Greek swarthy man couldn't have been the killer.
Right. That's how we're told.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, this film, it's kind of a mess.
Oh, and Lucio Fulci himself is in it. He plays the chief of police. In that one scene where he comes in the elevator and Jack Hedley greets him as like, "Hey, head of the police person," or something.
That's him?
Yeah, that's the director.
So this is interesting. This film's interesting because I think it's a mess.
Oh yeah, it's misogynist.
However, there are a lot of really good scenes in it. Like,
it's entertaining.
Like amusing. Yeah. So the opening scene is there's this like old man walking his dog like because they're in New York, so he's by the bay, and the dog finds like a dismembered hand.
Bessie the dog. Mm-hmm.
And the old man, the shot is just of his face kind of like catatonic. That was funny. Then there's a scene, so the first woman we see murdered is this bitch riding around the city on her bike, like just do, and she like bumps and scratches some car. And you know how I feel about my car and like having nice things and keeping them nice. She hits the car and the guy's like, "What the hell's wrong with you? You need to watch where you're going." And she says, "Oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about Boston."
Yeah,
I would have whooped that bitch's ass. Like, if you did it up my car because you're just fucking daydreaming while you ride your bike. But then she ends up getting on a ferry to cross the bay. And
she gets on the Staten Island. She follows him on the Staten Island ferry.
And the killer is in the same car she hit.
Well, she goes and finds this car and with her lipstick writes shit on the inside and then gets accosted by the Donald Duck killer.
She deserved to die, if you ask me. I was so upset.
All the scenes in this one don't quite work because, you know, Fulci is known as the godfather of gore and for having elaborate kills.
Yeah.
But all of these are, as you described between the two films we watched, is they're cutting up bodies like cake.
Every scene where someone's being stabbed, because of the practical effects, it looks like they're cutting cake, which I find so funny.
Well, because the woman, it's because I was a woman, is screaming bloody murder.
And they never move.
But they don't move. Like, they just like let their body be cut up.
It's funny.
Disturbing. And then there's an eyeball cut sequence, which I think he was trying to make an homage to Un Chien Andalou. Okay.
So there's a medical examiner, the lieutenant, like
the pathologist.
The pathologist. Who the lieutenant sort of gets information from as it pertains to the murders. And I wrote down, he is the shittiest
Mm-hmm.
When I die and my body's on that table, I hope I don't get someone like him. But it was funny to watch.
This is not a sex positive film, because even the Alexandra Delli Colli, after she's murdered, and the detective is kind of being judgmental of the husband and of his open marriage.
Yeah.
And of course the killer's motive. Just I don't know, New York in the early 80s.
So that lady, the older rich lady, so we find her masturbating in an adult theater. Then she goes off one night to find some fun, and she ends up in like some cafe, like,
oh god, yeah,
like in like the hood somewhere. And these two like Latino guys kind of recognize that there's this like rich white lady sitting there kind of wanting attention.
like staring at the bulge in one of their
This very like moose knuckle bulge. So they come over and they're like, yeah, you want it, like we know you want us. And the one guy takes off his shoe. And I don't have beautiful feet, but this man,
yes you do,
this man had some kind of gross feet, and he starts like using his feet. He penetrates her vagina with his feet, and you see it pretty much.
Right, and she's kind of down to clown until the other one, like, in an act of cruelty.
They antagonize her until she admits she likes it, and then they like rip the table away so you can see it's happening, and she gets embarrassed.
But there's no one else there.
But there's no one there, and it's so obvious that she's being like, you can't say fingered, footed under the table. I thought that was a very funny scene. Then she hooks up with the swarthy Greek man who only has like 3 fingers on one hand. And then there's a scene where she's tied up in bed with him having sex, and he's fingering her with that gross hand, which reminded me of like Chris Elliott in the Scary Movie.
She, poor thing. She wasn't in a ton of films, but she's notable for this film and another famous genre film called Zombie Holocaust.
But speaking of the kills, you know, they are funny because it looks like they're cutting cake. But the scene where they cut that nipple in half and then cut the eye in half, that was too much for me. So that was good. Also, when Peter in the end, the killer, he gets shot in the face.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty extreme too. Like, I jumped at that. And then my last note is that Peter's little sickly ass, pitiful ass daughter.
Like, because it's supposed, after he's been killed, there's a shot of the daughter with glycerin tears trying to call home, and it's just ringing. And she's like, "Daddy, pick up, please."
Oh.
And then we get like zoom out to the sounds of, I read somewhere, the sounds of the indifferent city.
The indifferent city. But that's it.
You know, I don't think you've seen Contraband, which is a Fulci film from this period, which is a very infamous scene where I think a prostitute or somebody posing as a prostitute gets her face burned off with a blowtorch.
Oh, okay.
That looked dangerous to film for that poor actress. This is also credited as a giallo, but I don't quite agree with that classification, because by this time, like, giallos were over. But that's how Fulci started out, with things like one of my favorites, Lizard in a Woman's Skin, and Don't Torture a Duckling, which is a lot of fun to watch as well.
Okay. What would you give this movie?
I would give this 2 out of 5. And also it's another 2-disc 4K release, and the second disc is chock full of extra features, including interviews with the women that played a lot of the victims.
Oh, nice. I didn't watch those, obviously. I would give it 2 out of 5 as well. But I do think, like, if you're with friends, maybe with a few drinks in hand, it would be a fun movie.
I think most of Fulci's films really do are assisted by having liquor in a large group watching them with you.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, bye.
Bye.